Hey everybody, and welcome to the Con Carolina's, writers track panel on storytelling in Dungeons and Dragons. My name is Rick Gualtieri. I'll be moderating. My background is I'm a fantasy slash comedy writer. You can see a few of my characters in the background there. I have about 30 books out. And this is actually a perfect panel for me to jump into because I was dungeon mastering just last night. I'm not going to go into that because my players, let's just say, I don't want to call them incompetent, but well,
Chris A. Jackson, and that is not a real Kraken behind me. That is a animated one. But if you see tentacles going around my face, I write science fiction, fantasy, a lot of different things. I've been published through several gaming companies. I wrote Pathfinder Tales for Paizo Publishing. I wrote some stuff for Iron Kingdoms, some stuff for Legendary Games, some stuff for Arkham Horror. Gaming's always been a part of my life. I started gaming in 1978, second edition or first edition D&D. And since then, pretty much how I got the storytelling bug in my ear. I've got about 30 novels out right now with Falstaff Press, a lot of self-published stuff, and once again with the Paizo and some of the other gaming stuff.
Hi, I feel like such a newbie because I'm actually slightly younger than Dungeons and Dragons. My name is Rachel. R.E. Carr is what I write under. I do urban fantasy, comedy. I even have the joy of writing a series with our moderator, Rick Gualtieri, called the False Icon series. Like many young geeks, I got into gaming in high school, mostly when I stole my brother's Dungeon Master guide. And because nobody wanted a girl in their group, I just started running the first all-girl group in our high school, which quickly became very popular when another group came in and they're like, wait, there's a whole group of girls that want to play Dungeons and Dragons. It started me, and I wrote my first novels, which have never seen the light of day, based on my Dungeons and Dragons campaign that I wrote. And now, almost 10 books later, I still love to play D&D, and I use bits and pieces of it more to relax now, but also just to get ideas for storytelling.
Hi, I'm Alex Rath, military science fiction and post-apocalyptic. At the moment, there's a fantasy book coming a little later, maybe like this year, early next year. Got D&D. I actually started playing D&D in about 79. I think I still have my original red box.
Oh wow!
Set with the dice you had to color with a white crayon.
Oh my!
Yeah, I feel like I'm like the newbie author here. I've got five or six books. I can't remember at this point. 3 or 4 short stories, but still working on it. And man, yeah, D&D. That's what really started the creative juices for me. I mean, I became a dungeon master probably the first year I played, and after that, I rarely got to play anymore because I was the storyteller. I was the guy that could get people's minds going. And funny fact about D&D, my wife and I met playing D&D.
Mine too.
In college.
Yeah, in grad school.
At my D&D game, she came to a game. We were actually both in the marching band too, so we were geeks on a very high level.
Right.
Marching band and D&D.
Wow.
But we actually met at a D&D game, and the rest is history. That was 1989.
I dated many of my players, but never gave them extra XP. I just like it known.
XP.
We'll just leave that.
That's code.
We'll leave that there.
Yep. Too much information.
All right. Well, I mean, we should probably start this off like any good combat. Roll initiative.
Oh crap!
I didn't bring my dice.
Do I have to get my dice? Are in the other room. I have to yell.
All right, I'll let you all off the hook.
It doesn't matter. I roll a 1 no matter what. I am the world's slowest D&D player.
That was me last night. A lot of 1s, but all right. So you guys all kind of like I'm going to skip ahead because you guys all pretty much crushed my first question, which was going to be give me your background as gamers. So instead, I think I got a fun one for us to jump in with. Are there any in-game, whether as a player or DM, encounters that you've had that have made it into any of your books? And regardless of whether or not published is best, but if not published, that's fine. And Rachel, why don't we start with you?
Oh no. Oh God. I mean, I did get the idea to behead somebody and have their ghost haunt the rest of their party. I tend to, everyone jokes that it's an R.E. Carr book when somebody's other personality comes in and possesses them and starts taking over. And that did come from when I was running my high school D&D game, because it seemed to be that everyone loved the possessed character. And I have definitely carried that through into particularly my Rules Undying series, where there's one guy with 3 personalities, and my audiobook narrator has not forgiven me to this day.
I think not necessarily a character, but a characterization. One of my, when I did get to play, my wife and I used to just role play a lot. Using D&D environments like Forgotten Realms is where I've always played. And I had a character that was a vampire. And his big thing was that he hated anyone that would hurt women. That was just his thing from when he was a regular person to then. And I didn't take that particular thing over, but just the drive to rid the world of a certain kind of thing, I kind of actually carried over into middle sci-fi. The book cover that's behind me for a book called Scales of Justice, it's a race called the Serpentis. Strangely, snakes, big fangs, giant snakes in this case. But right now, they're going after slavers. That's their big thing. They hate slavers. So I've spent a book and a short story and about to be another book just going after slavers with this race.
I kind of have an unfair advantage here in 2 ways. I've created entire characters that are actually part of the Pathfinder role-playing game world to write Pathfinder tales. But aside from that, my first effort, much like Rachel's, my first effort in writing was I had created in graduate school a game to play with some friends, and it took about 2 years to run it. So when we finished it, and that is where I met my future wife, I had a stack of source materials about almost a foot high with all the maps and character vignettes, because I create NPCs just like popcorn. And so I have all this stuff statted out, detailed out, maps, you name it. And so Anne and I, my wife Anne and I, we're looking at this big stack of stuff after we're done. It's like, what the hell do we do with all this stuff? I'm not going to throw it away. We could just write the story. So I got permission from the other players to write their characters. I had to change some things, of course. And being a naive, I mean, like babe in the woods naive writer, I figured I'll write this up and I'll submit it to TSR. Yeah, well, that's what you don't do if you want to get into game writing, right? But I submitted it. They rejected it, rightfully so. Not only was it basically an IP violation, they didn't even tell me that, which was kind of cruel. They should have just said, don't write in our IP unless we ask you to. But anyway, so what I did was I hemmed and hawed about it and stuck it on a shelf and then started writing other books. But after that, then I'm looking at almost 300,000 words of stuff that I don't want to just throw away. So I completely scrubbed off all the IPs, wrote it all up, and I've self-published it since then. And it's the Cornerstones trilogy. So yeah, absolutely, I've done that. And I mean, every single game I get into, I'm like, it's all about character for me. So creating characters, creating NPCs, creating all these people. So yeah, these people invade my books all the time. In fact, secondary, tertiary characters in my books sometimes become my gaming characters too. So it works both ways. It's a lot of fun.
It's funny that you mentioned reaching out to TSR. Last year I reached out to Paizo because I'm in a podcast where we called the Authors and Dragons, where me and 5 other fantasy writers, we played D&D badly, and we all wrote origin stories for our characters.
Right.
I reached out to Paizo because I wanted to use one of their gods, and I just wanted to see what kind of permissions I needed. And they sent me this huge long thing of legalese. But
Right.
then they were cool about it, and they were like, you could go down this route, which would take forever and cost a lot of money, or you could just change the spelling a little bit, and we won't care.
So, and that's the thing. When you're writing fiction for these gaming companies, there's a lot of stuff that Paizo has in their game that you cannot put in a piece of fiction. It's bizarre. You cannot call a knoll a knoll.
Really?
call it, you have to call it a hyena folk. I kid you not. But because Knoll is something that's owned by Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
This
they're
is why
insane.
there are no mind flayers in Pathfinder.
Or
Yeah.
drow, for that matter. They call them
Yep.
dark elves, right?
Hmm.
There's lots of beholders. Everything that's got their stamp on it. Yeah, it's a minefield, and I'm glad that they have people that check all the shit we write. Excuse me, all the
Oh,
stuff.
you got the one.
That's the one. PG-13. Sorry. All the stuff we write. I've had really awesome editors at Paizo and at the other game companies I work with. They know the content like the back of their hand, and it's just it's such a pleasure to work with these people.
Yeah, I just remember someone from a certain gaming company that produced a certain game obviously didn't check, because I was very surprised when I opened a certain gaming book and read some of their background material and went, how the heck is it from a game that I ran in Memphis, Tennessee in the 90s? And then looked at the credits and discovered one of my players was using my game as
Nice.
their writing.
Oh,
I'm still mad.
Always change enough just to for
Oh,
plausible deniability.
yeah, that was
yeah.
not fun.
That is something that can run into some serious lawsuits. If it was a money making proposition for you and somebody used that,
Yeah.
oh man,
Unfortunately,
this is why you have it.
I just got free pizza from
Yeah,
my gaming group. It's
I'm
really
working
sad.
on the fantasy book I've got on the shelf right now is actually based on one of the big characters I played in D&D. But
Awesome.
I am having to change some things to not run afoul of wizards.
Oh yeah.
Back in the TSR days, I actually had contacts because I worked for TSR Online back when they had a presence on AOL. So I had contacts, and I maybe could have gotten some leeway. Wizards, I'm not messing with wizards.
No, do not mess with Wizards of the Coast. I remember I entered their contest, and their legalese to enter their contest. It was like working at the Disney store. You're like, wait, if I breathe, you own it?
I saw that and said no.
Yeah, I made that mistake, and now I have a lovely manuscript of stuff that I really can't do anything with. I don't think I could ever scrub it enough.
Oh, you can grind off the serial numbers. I totally did. It's meticulous and time consuming, and hey, pulled my hair out, right? So that's why I'm bald.
I know what you guys mean. One of my series, the character is a gamer, and he's constantly whatever stupid scenarios he gets into, he thinks back like, okay, this one time in the game, and I would say half of those are from actual game experiences, but it's done in a very generic way.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure somebody in that game, if they remembered it, could be like, hey, wait a second. But yeah, it's that there's try to stay away from those minefields.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we could definitely spend an entire hour talking about that stuff. But this is the writing track. It's supposed to be a little educational there. So let's talk about how has D&D helped you as an author with regards to certain aspects. And probably a good place to start is character development, because whether you're a dungeon master or whether you're a player, you can either kind of show up and just be that person who's like, okay, mechanical, I'm just roll my dice, cast fireball, but that's no fun. Character makes the game. So how have your D&D experience or your game playing experience, how has that affected your ability to develop character?
I like to say, and some of my readers tend to agree, that I write very character-centric books. Obviously, the plot has to be there, or there's not a book. But I do write very character-centric, and that does come from D&D, because I never ran, and some younger folks may not know this terminology, but I never ran Monty Hall campaigns.
Oh yeah.
You're all familiar with this.
Yes.
Some people may not be. Monty Hall basically means you just keep rolling dice and collecting loot. And there's no real story. You're just rolling dice and collecting loot. Oh, I want to fight some kobolds. Bang, more loot. I want to fight this, more loot. My stories or my campaigns, whether if I was going to play them, they had to be story driven. if I was going to DM them, they definitely were. I mean, you might roll dice 2 or 3 times in a 2-hour game because it's
Sounds
more
like my
about
games.
it's more about the setup. It's more about the story. And I mean, when I played a character that smoked a pipe. So I have in my desk drawer still from those days 2 pipes that I would use while playing. I didn't light them and smoke them, but it was an affectation. It helped me get into the character. So when I'm writing, and I will confess, I am not an outliner. I am a pantser all the way. I can't outline to save my life. I tried it on 2 books and it did not go well. My characters get a mind of their own when I'm writing. My characters go off and do their own thing. And I know that may not make a lot of sense, but I think for you guys it'll make sense. And if you're thinking about writing, it will happen to you. You will be writing, and suddenly you will have in your head that this character is going to do this, and then you'll realize that's not really them. That's not in their character. So I think having played D&D and having worked through, especially if you're like true to an alignment system or something like that where actions really matter, it makes a big difference for me in writing characters, because I like to think my characters will remain true.
The characters thing is why I can never ever finish a computer game, a computer RPG game, because I get about halfway through and then I decide, this would be a lot more fun if I created a necromancer character who only uses a dagger. And then I'll play that. Well, this would be a lot more fun if I created the archer character who did it. And I create entire storylines in my head over these things.
So you've never finished Skyrim either?
Yeah, Skyrim, basically.
None of us have. You definitely.
No. Speak for yourself. I have.
Daggerfall, you name it. It's all the same sad story for me. I create a character, play about halfway through, and then create a new character. So, but very much so, I'm very much a character writer, and that actually the first real exercise playing D&D, where I got to really flesh out the NPCs and the bad guys and the villains and everyone, was this campaign that I told you about that turned into the Cornerstones trilogy. And in the first 2 books, the primary bad guy is this guy called Ivorun Darkmist, and he's basically a Death Knight. But I couldn't just make him the bad guy. I had to give him a whole backstory of why he was bad. He has these 2 domineering sisters. He's always trying to prove himself and blah, 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 blah. And, and so how do you prove yourself to your evil family? You go take over the world, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, very much character driven, but that was where I really got to create full-blown backstory characters, and after you start doing that, you're not really just GMing anymore, you're story building. And I'm creating the world, I'm creating the plot line, and those are the 3 things that hold a story up: plot, characters, and setting. And if you've got those 3 things, you're golden. And I just believe that character has to be first, because, okay, here's the reason why. Settings, they've pretty much all been done. Plots, there's only basically a dozen different plots out there. Characters are infinitely diverse, malleable, and that's what the reader falls in love with. Now, there are examples out there of setting-driven fiction that are iconic. Dune is the classic, but you wouldn't have fallen in love with the Dune planet Arrakis if you didn't have that whole dynamic of the characters pushing it and holding it up. It's like, how can these people survive here? And what's going on, and all the politics and all the love and hate and dedication and devotion, all these things that are holding the characters together. That's what makes the setting really take life. So yeah, I talk too much too.
It's okay. I'm just going to totally interrupt and be the other GM. But I think that D&D, if you're talking about what skills it can give you, is it's really your first instance of working with feedback. Your players are beta readers and editors and audience and super fans all in one. It's like you get real-time work of, if I make a character like this, are people interested, or they just want to roll and kill some hyena folk? I don't want to get in trouble. I think that what it does is it gives you practice with making different characters, of trying things. And honestly, sometimes the best part of D&D is you can do something that completely sucks. You can do something that sucks and is horrible, and you can put yourself in a corner, and those skills you get fixing those problems are what are going to save you as a writer. When you have the characters, when you've planned an encounter and you've made a dungeon and you worked 3 friggin' months, and those 2 jerks, the friggin' noble warrior and the paladin, just come through and burn a hole in the wall and bypass 3 weeks worth of traps you worked on, and all of a sudden they're at the end of the dungeon in 1 week, you really have to think. And yes, that actually happened, if you can't
I was
tell
about
by
to
the
say that this feels like experience here.
Ironically, that's my ex-fiance and my husband were the 2 guys that did this to me.
Wow, you've got some serious chutzpah if you can play with an ex-fiance.
Yeah. Hey, what can I say? I'm probably the only person you've ever met that ran off with their fiance to start dating their husband. But it was quite an experience, because also you have weeks where you have cranky players who won't do what you want to do, and they're just like characters, and you can sometimes have weeks where you have no idea. And I think that D&D gives you that you have to perform. It gives you a lot of improv skills, and also a lot of just the nuts and bolts of being a writer, which is a lot of your ideas are actually not that good, but you have to make the best of them.
Yeah, and any writer that says they've never written themselves into a corner is a liar.
Lying.
Liar!
Oh, yeah. Especially Rick, if he ever
So,
says
about the outlining
When have I ever lied about that? I write myself into corners all the time. I live in a box.
I live in a dodecahedron. There's more corners there.
That is a very good set of corners.
But about the outlining thing that you mentioned, Alex, so I am an outliner, and I'm hopeless if I don't outline. But the one thing I never, ever do is follow my outline.
That is a very good point.
It's just this skeleton, and I know going in that it's going to change, and very much so. I mean, I wrote a 6-book series where halfway through the first book, I realized that a secondary character wasn't really going to be a secondary character. She was going to be a co-primary, and I had to tear up like 5 chapters to go fix it. And so people who have difficulty with outlines are the people who say, this is my structure and I have to stick to it. No, but yeah, if you ask 100 writers how they write, you'll get 100 different answers.
Oh, yeah.
Wrong. Oh, yeah. That's what works for them.
Yeah,
you guys.
I was discussing that with some other authors last week, actually, and we were talking about it. Everybody was talking about drafts. I know this is slightly off topic, Rick. Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Squirrel.
And I said, I've never written a second draft. I've written my first run. I've gone back through, corrected a few edit things, maybe changed a scene here and there. I've never done a full second draft.
Oh, God. I've done 6.
I think it's beginner's luck.
Yeah,
is what I'm calling it. I'm only 6 books and 4 short stories into my career, so I'm calling it beginner's luck.
No, you're 100% right about ask 100 authors, get 100 different answers. Because I'm the opposite. Typically, when I release a book, it's like around anywhere from 5th to the 7th draft, because I have what I personally call the magic draft, where up until then it's just words, and I always have one draft where suddenly all the pieces come together and the characters become real, the plots get the loose ends get connected. And in my case, if I tried to release a one draft, I know for a fact it would be garbage. But something, no matter how many drafts you write, it really doesn't matter as long as you get to the finish line, you release a good product.
And there's what's really important about drafts and editing and things like that. You have to know when to stop.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I learned this adage working for physicians. The enemy of good is better. The enemy of better is perfect. You're never going to make the book perfect. Good editors know this.
Yeah, I love my editors.
Editors are magic, and
yes.
Yeah, they are the.
If you're an editor and you're listening, thank you.
Thank you. We love you.
We wouldn't be here without you.
I've worked with, probably 10 different editors, and I have learned something that has made me a better writer from every single one of them. Even the
Yep.
ones I hated and could not work with anymore, I learned something valuable from them.
Usually what not to do. I had that experience too. Yeah.
I will throw a special shout out because yes, 100% agreed with editors, but I tend to use a lot of beta readers, and man, I have had some beta readers take me to task on things, and they have been so right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm still feeling a few.
Oh yeah.
All
I
right,
have.
all right.
Yep.
All right,
They're
so
like your players in the game.
Well, that's exactly what they are.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking you guys are all like all Psionicist subclasses because you guys have been like hammering every question I had before I can answer it. So let's talk about we talked about characters. Let's talk about a specific type of character. D&D is all about the heroes, but it's also about the antagonists because the heroes are only as good as whatever evil is either, and it doesn't matter. It can be big. Whatever evil is going to destroy the world or whatever evil just wants to burn down that orphanage. Sometimes that's the characters. But
Talking about yourself?
I may have burned down a few. But let's talk about how D&D helps you build better antagonists, whether they're monsters or whatnot.
I kind of gave you a little bit of a feel for that about the villain that I created for the Cornerstone trilogy, but it's interesting. You can create the big, dark, menacing villain who's just kind of a tool, and that can work, but it works so much better if you give that villain a reason for doing what they're doing. Kind of a catchphrase is, no evil person in history ever got up in the morning and said, I'm going to be evil today. They're doing what they think is right. And even absolutely morally reprehensible people, I mean, Adolf Hitler comes to mind. He was doing what he thought was right, whether it was for power or for greed or for something else. That was his agenda. Having said that, you can write a story without a villain, where some other thing is the foil for the protagonists. I have written that story, and it's an interesting thing to do where nobody's the bad guy. Just something untoward happens that everybody has to fix.
No, I love that, because one thing that annoys the crap out of me, like I'm looking at the Kraken picture, and I read a lot of creature fiction, and I write some as well. And one thing that annoys me is when you have this whole thing. It's like, hey, we have giant killer sharks out there. Oh, but we have to throw in just a random generic bad guy. And it's like, why?
Right. Killer sharks are bad enough, right?
Poor shark.
But, I've done this more than once. The cursed weapon, the magical twist, the thing that makes somebody do something that they wouldn't normally do, and make this person not really a bad person, but the protagonist's deal is to either deal with them or deal with this curse or deal with getting around it some way, or even saving that person. So yeah, there's lots of ways to play with that. But yeah, a good villain has to have agency, has to have a reason for what they're doing. Just throwing somebody out there who's the big bad evil guy, I'll be evil today, that never works. So yeah.
I am notorious in both my gaming and in my books for the protagonist you're following to find out that they indeed are actually the villain. I think there's one thing of being a DM for years. You're in the mindset that you're kind of that antagonistic force. I don't think any GM goes, gee, I'm here to help my players today. But that's about building conflict. And I think it can teach you that you don't always have to have a conflict. Like, what can make an interesting story is when you're not necessarily following the goody two-shoes, or worse yet, you're following the person that thinks they are doing everything right. And when you kind of step back, you go, oh no, oh dear, I'm the bad guy. I've done that a couple times, and I think it's a powerful tool if you use right. And if you do it badly, I mean, on the good side, you're Sixth Sense by M. Night Shyamalan. On the bad side, you're, well, almost every other M. Night Shyamalan twist.
We were the monsters all along.
Oh God.
Yeah, I mean, and I do go back to D&D for this because my wife and I, in college, when we were still dating, we had a very small group, and we had a company. Basically, every person was running 2 characters, which made things interesting and fun, because seeing people switch roles and and in some cases talking to themselves was kind of fun. But they did it, and that was the coolest thing. But the antagonist I wrote up for that storyline ended up later being a character I played for a very long time. And he was lawful evil. He was most definitely a bad guy. But he was doing what was best for his people. Like Chris was talking about. So I do carry that over, or I try to, in some of my work. I've written in 3 universes owned by other people. So I have certain rules that I have to follow. The book I'm working on now, I'm writing my own world from the ground up for the first time, which is more of a challenge than writing in someone else's world, because I have no Bible to go by. So I'm inventing it all as I go, and it's without saying too much about it because it's not out yet. It's kind of a first contact sci-fi novel. And very much as you might think in a first contact novel, the environment itself is the biggest bad guy there. But yet, and I think the major trick I'm that my wife tells me I'm pulling off as she pre-reads, so I'm about halfway through, probably about 50,000 words. My wife tells me I'm pulling it off, that I'm actually giving the environment almost a personality.
Oh wow.
That we know the environment isn't intellectual, the environment isn't acting against them, but it sure as heck seems like it, because everything goes along. Boom, this breaks. Son of a gun. Okay, now we'll get a breather. We'll give the reader a break. We'll give them some nice, happy things, flowers and birds, and then they get stomped on again. Well, this is what you have to do. Doing that in D&D was big for me too, because I didn't always want there to be a bad guy that the group was trying to go after. Sometimes I would just set them off down a path. Say, okay, go, be happy, do things, go try to find treasure maps or, whatever. And of course, in my head, I've got 10 different things that might happen.
Right.
But, sometimes I'd have them roll for no particular reason, which I did all the time. Constantly having them roll for no reason whatsoever.
Oh, every DM does that. That's like classic.
So that they never knew when it mattered.
Right.
And suddenly it would matter, and one of them would trip and fall, and, that would rile up a nest of snakes, and, that would draw the attention of, boom, 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 the dominoes start falling, and, oh, there's your big encounter you were looking for, guys. Okay, now shut up and let's go.
Yeah, if you can run if you can GM a game like a tabletop role playing game, I don't care what game it is, from the hip, just make it up as you go. You have arrived, and it is so fun.
Oh yeah, I always did that.
Yeah. I mean, we've gotten together, and somebody shows up and like, okay, we can't run that game because they're not here. Da 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 da. Well, I can make something up. Let's go. Roll up a 5th level character. Let's go.
I guess that's why I'm a first draft writer. I don't know.
I do it all the time, and I'm an outliner. So there you go. Right. What do you do for a living? I make stuff up.
For a living, I'm an IT guy, but I make stuff up there too.
Yeah, I'm an accountant. I don't make stuff up. I had a conversation
with the guy the other day. What is programming? It's a creative endeavor. You're creating something.
I've been a programmer for 25 years.
Yeah, there you go.
I went and told the class, I did a career day at school about 2 years back, and I was like, you're talking to a bunch of people who are doctors, lawyers, all sorts of cool things. They're like, but guess what? I get paid to lie for a living because I'm a fiction writer. Well, Chris brought it up as a plot, as one of the 3 tenets of good storytelling, and Alex went into it a bit. But obviously, plot is important. But how has D&D taught you about pacing? Because the best plot in the world, if you're boring the crap out of people, doesn't mean anything. And if if you can't pace the plot to fit, keep people interested. Same way with a game. You can kind of tell when you're losing the players, when we're all kind of looking at their watch and half of them are getting up for a Cheetos break.
Right.
How has D&D helped you with regards to pacing?
Well, it's like I said, it's real-time feedback. As soon as the food is more interesting than the game, I mean, unless it's really, really good. I mean, some nights, like, it's really good. You know you need to pick things up, but you start getting a rhythm. You know, it's like the old screenwriting adage, every 10 minutes you need to blow something up, which is really depressing in like a small block comedy, but you know what I mean. You have to have some sort of set piece, some sort of action, some sort of movement, and start hitting those beats. If you're in a game night, unless the character interaction is so swish and so deep, you need to know that you have to have an encounter at least once a night. You need to have
Hmm.
your audience engaged. You need to give them some motion and some movement. And I really think that having effectively a live audience gives you that experience. It's nothing that you can just go instantly, hey, I've got a feel for it. You need to practice and you need to watch. And you also need to know that different players are going to expect different pacing. And you sort of, the more you see of different people, the more you can kind of get to this average. And I think it really helps because it gets you a wider audience. And you know that there's always going to be some people who want nothing but character. And you know you get better at writing for them and keeping that engaged. And there's going to be some people who only want to blow stuff up. That was my paladin. Why did he play a paladin if all he wanted to do was blow stuff up? But you get what I'm saying. I think it gives you, it's like when I studied music, you have to study all different kinds of music to find your own voice. And I think gaming gives you a chance to practice pacing.
Hey, you talk about music. I was a music major for 2 years. Pacing, man. I'll be honest, as a writer, that's something I'm still working on. I recently wrote a couple chapters and handed them to my wife to pre-read, and I said, I think these are paced really, really well. Probably the best pacing I've ever done. And she read it and said, "Wow." And when your spouse will say that, because usually your spouse is going to be, hopefully, if they're honest, your best / worst critic. Because I want her to tell me if she reads a chapter and it stinks. She just doesn't get it. It's paced wrong. Pacing really, it really is something I'm still working on. But yeah, I'm finally, I think, getting the gauge where because like I said before, I'm a big character writer. I like writing dialogue scenes. I had another author tell me they don't write staff meetings because they find them boring. I love writing staff meetings because I get the characters. The characters are interacting. I see their emotions. I see what they like. I see what they don't like. I love that kind of thing. But then there's too much of that. I'm writing military science fiction. I have a certain audience. My audience for my mil sci-fi work wants things blowing up. Lots of it. They want high body count. So I give them that. But I've got to get what's me in there too, or it's not really my book. So I'm still working on finding that mix where I'm happy with the work product because it's got my name on it and it represents who I am. So yeah, pacing, I'm still working on it. It's a work in progress for me. I've only been published for a little over a year, so still getting there. But D&D definitely helped me get there. It got me to where I am now, instead of starting out, with the first thing I wrote going straight into the garbage can. I mean, the first thing I wrote got published. And well, it didn't hurt that I co-wrote it with my publisher.
That is a pretty good start.
Yeah, I pitched it to Chris and he said, well, let's write it together. So I said, okay. And I learned pacing from that too, because he helped me when my writing started getting bogged down in character. He said, time to blow something up.
That's what I have Rick for. He blows things up on my behalf. He's always like, you can cut like 15 pages of just this character crap. So I get it. We're kind of the same personality.
I mentioned beta readers where it's always wonderful when you have one beta reader saying, this is a great character chapter. Another's like, couldn't you just kill something instead?
Just to be really quick, because I know we're getting close. There's a pretty simple graph now I'm talking fantasy. Pacing is different for just about every genre. But for fantasy, you need a starting high point, some action, some conflict beginning to set up your characters. You can do characters and blow shit up at the same time, people. Oh, so don't think that I'm doing this, then I'm doing this. It's all together. But beginning, high point, action, bring it down, start building the tension, little peaks like this, and then the crescendo at the end. And that is the fantasy pacing template. Now you can play with that as much as you want, but that's worked for me for 30 books. Now you can also create odd things like time jumps back and forth, but that template, that graph really works. Now, if you're going to write horror, forget about it. That's not the template. It starts out slow and it gets creepier and creepier and creepier and creepier, and then it peaks up like this and then goes down. So, but yeah, pacing's a lot of fun.
So one of my books, one of the characters mentions an old character he had played named Professor Blastingus, who was an insane alchemist. And about a year later, one of my characters died, and I needed to create a new one. I was like, wait a second, I've already created it. So I essentially made that character for my book. Have there ever been any times for you guys where, we've talked about how how D&D influences your writing, where your writing has influenced your D&D?
I can take this one really quick. I'll be honest. I haven't played since I started writing.
Oh.
No one to play with.
I'm a player now and not a DM. So I certainly, when I did fantasy, there was a little bit of blowback, but nope, I only play to escape, and I'm a drunken fighter with no backstory other than being blackout drunk.
I can play any character in almost any game, and I would go crazy if I did not play in some way, shape, or form. And these can even be like board games and stuff like that, because I flesh those characters out too. But we do a lot of stuff on Roll20 online now, especially now when you don't want to touch anybody. But so yeah, that's my outlet. But definitely my writing has invaded my my gaming a lot because of characters. So
I was gonna say with board games, it's like, dude, you're just playing the shoe. We don't need to hear the backstory.
Oh, the laces were frayed as a young baby shoe, and it was so sad.
No.
I never did the right thing.
The Scotty dog was adopted. Everyone knows that.
Oh God.
I think that's a good point to end at, isn't it? The Monopoly.
Yeah, that
character.
Where's my top hat? Hold on.
The race car was crashed, and the hat had a broken rim.
And the dog escaped from the pound,
And then he gets sent to jail.
Slowly going rabid as he goes around.
Okay, guys, I think we're digressing, right? As gamers do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and writers.
Hey, I write a little bit of horror, so. All right, guys, why don't you tell us a little bit about your latest projects, where we can find it, and why people should be interested. And if you could spin D&D into it, that much better.
I'm playing D&D next weekend with the Con Carolinas crew on a virtual game, and I'm playing a barbarian who beats up bullies. What could be more fun than that? And to find my stuff, just go to my website. It's jaxbooks, jaxbooks.com. You can get free samples of all of my work there. I write for a bunch of gaming companies. I have a bunch of self-published stuff. I have a new novel coming out next month from Falstaff in my Dragons of Boston series. And I'm working in the 4th book of the Bloodsea Tales, which is a pirate, tropical, chaotic, pirates, magic, and romance, all wadded up in a ball. So that's lots of fun. So stop by, give it a read, and have fun.
Shameless self-promotion is over my head. I can be found at www.rachelecar.com, because the other R.E. Carr wrote vegan cookbooks. You won't find me there. I have a new book with Rick Walteri called Wannabe Wizard that is up for pre-order. And as far as D&D, I have to look forward to that on Monday night, where I play with a bunch of other authors. Hopefully one day we'll be streaming that too.
Yeah, you can find me at my website, alexrathauthor.com, or just put my name in on Amazon. pretty much the only Alex rat there. See, one of my Four Horsemen books coming out on Audible in a couple of weeks. Working on my own universe for science fiction. I've actually got a fantasy book also about 50,000 words done, so maybe halfway done. So maybe sometime later this year, early next, we'll get into that. And that one is based on one of my favorite long-time running D&D characters. So.
And as I mentioned at the beginning, my name is Rick Gualtieri. You can find me at rickgualtieri.com. And as I mentioned earlier, check me out on the Authors and Dragons podcast or that book that I wrote with that other person whose name I don't remember who's on this panel. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much, panelists. If you're at home, give them some big applause, and go out and roll some 20-siders, preferably not critical failures.